Coilscrew, written by Unknown. As a child, I had truly adored my grandfather. He was a now rare breed of a man, a word spinner and brilliant storyteller, whose words would paint vivid images inside your head, which would stay imprinted in your mind forever. And since I was an infant, his stories seemed like magic to me. He told me of far-off places and paradises, cityscapes and Great Lakes, animals with exotic names, which exploded on the tongue like spices. If I try to remember his good stories and close my eyes, I can remember the ideas I heard from him better than most memories that I saw with my eyes, even ones from an age as young as that. That's how good he was. Now, I've mentioned already that I think he had good stories, which means I've inferred that some were bad. I apologize. I'm not even half the storyteller my grandfather was, but here's the basic gist. He told me, where he usually did, in front of that grand fireplace, the only thing which made his little house beautiful. He lowered his voice to a sibilant whisper like dead leaves blowing across the ground in winter, so that my mother couldn't hear. She was never present when he told me his stories. She often stayed in the garden or chatted with the neighbors. He described how he once had a friend whose passion was for the science of anatomy. He'd longed for a long time to discover the trick to life, and he'd attempted to do this by combining creatures with, before, little success. This was disturbing in itself, but this time, I have a new piece, his friend said. It worked this time. I didn't do all the work. Most of it I found already like this, but still come and have a look. But mind yourself, it's rather offensive. Maybe the words of his friend were branded onto his brain like his description was to mine. His friend led him to a metal door, the only metal door in the facility. You'll understand why it's assigned to this room soon, he had assured him. My grandfather described how he'd made to open the handle, and his friend stilled his hand and instead directed his eye to a peek hole in the door. And this is what he saw. A being, not cowering but in the middle of the room, awaiting a visitor with relish. It even seemed to be bouncing slightly, he'd said, staring into the distance and troubled, when he noticed its legs were not there at all, but there was only one huge rusted spring as a base, like a monster. Its whole torso was made from latticed, different hues of skin, sewn crudely together to cover him from groin to head. Its arms were springs, but less rusted and more slender, interlaced with what he perceived to be a network of nerves all the way to the end of its fingers, which were actually hooks, stained red, from rust or blood, he never knew. And its head, oh, the images my mind created of this never left me. A pale ball, bulbous, not humanoid, a long mouth stretching from where ears would be on a human. But its black ears and eyes were only holes as big as nailheads, and full of needles, like the ones used to pierce flesh or fabric in injections, or sewing protruding from an inch thick. Pale pink gum, which reflected the light where it reflected off the coating of saliva. The teeth were randomly and double-lined, like a shark, he said. By now, I remember feeling petrified beyond panic, and my face must have reflected my feelings. I wonder why, now, he grimly continued. Maybe he was too thorough to simply leave a story unfinished. He told me how he pulled away from the hole, and at that moment heard a noise like a caw combined with a squeak, like a damp cloth on a plate, followed by panting like a dog, and noises like the springs of mattresses make. His friend had looked abashed for a moment, then said, "Sorry, you've excited dear little Coilscrew. He senses you." He quickened the pace of his tail now. I remember how he said now suddenly the door started quaking as the Coilscrew began scratching at the door. The noise like rusty springs from the other side of the door. The blood had drained from his friend's face, and he bolted up the corridor, just as the door fell down and it bounded out. Now he, my grandfather as he portrayed himself that is, saw the full extent of this thing's abilities. It bounced forward only a little after his creator, before instead extending his spring arms and hooking him back by the eye sockets. It proceeded to bite into him as he reeled him over, tiny little pinpricks which seeped blood and left little scratches and drink. About then, it remembered the presence of my grandpa. He looked up at his face, creaking as his neck springs bent, and hissed. Then he told me of how he ran, and never looked back. Now he fully looked at me and told me, "You must remember this story. It is very important for you to remember, because one day you may need to remember some monsters are truly real, my dear." At that moment, my mother walked in. She saw me, tiny face rigid in terror, and my grandpa's face, and heard his words, and at that moment dived on him and began shaking his shoulders. "Have you been telling her that goddamn story, Pa? I told you to never tell a child of this family that again. You disturbed her like you disturbed Katie, and you know what happened to her." She turned and grabbed my hand. "Come on, sweetie, we're leaving now. It's okay. Forget the scary things that he's been telling you." As she quickly brought me out of the house, I remember hearing Gramps shouting, "Katie didn't die because she was disturbed. It was the Coilscrew, goddammit. Helen, it's for her own protection. It'll hunt down any who saw it, and her family. And we should all be warned." His incessant shouts waned to nothing as we walked to the car and drove off. I remember not being able to sleep months after that story, and we never saw Gramps again. But I did some digging around afterward and found his job had been traveling to various scientific facilities around the globe. I also found the institute that his friend worked at, whose name turned out to be Colin, and all of his colleagues were killed but never found. The families had sought truth on the internet, and all concluded that the work had been too secret, and they'd been assassinated in a conspiracy. I always wondered why my grandpa had told me that story, and as he was diagnosed bipolar before his death, and lived out his last days in a mental institution, I think he'd made it up as an after effect of losing a friend so close. But the idea of such a being scared me then, and still does now. So I thought I'd post it here. Now, time to return to my present life. There is paperwork to fill. And I can hear birds singing, and God, I can hear my son bouncing on the bed. I thought I told him to never mess around in my room.